Hey there, sword friends. We have a special one today. We are responding to Scalagrim. Scalagrim just posted a video where he and Matt Easton were talking about wavy blades, which are really cool. So Flamberge, flammenschwert, they go by a whole bunch of different names, and they're seen in a variety of different cultures. And it just so happens, I am very fortunate that arriving at my sword daycare is an example of one of these very interesting type of swords. So this is the style of a Katzbalger, which is a type of short sword that is associated in particular with the Landsknecht type of German mercenaries that are from the early 16th century. So these type of swords are seen from, let's say, 1500 to 1550 or so. So the first half of the 16th century. And that is around the time that in Europe in particular we see these wavy type of blades being seen. So obviously anything that we're about to embark upon, because we are going to be testing this blade, is not going to be generalizable to all types of wavy blades, because they're seen in many different cultures across many different sword types, both double-edged and single-edged, all over the world at different points in time. From the 16th century onwards, you can find almost any type of sword with waves in it at some point in time. So they're often associated with the big two-handed swords, the big Zweihanders in Germany, for instance, the Schlachtschwerts. But these short swords, these Katzbalgers, long swords, rapiers, small swords, spadroons, you name it, it's been made with wavy blades, and they're not all done the same. Some, like this example, started as essentially a straight double-edged sword that then had the undulations ground into it. Others generally are a little bit more gentle in their waves and were forged in. So from the get-go, the smith made the waves and oftentimes even made the ridge in the center wave like a serpent all the way down the length. So the number of undulations, the size of them, the way that they're put into the blade, all will vary from sword to sword. So whatever we learn in experimenting with this sword is not going to be generalizable necessarily to all swords. So whether a single-edged Dusägge, one that has sharp points at the end compared to ones that are round, it's going to be impossible to say that the reasons that one person put waves on their sword is going to be the same that someone put them on all other swords. It is worth noting that I've tried to look up historical examples of these in art, and the only time that I have found one so far in European art is on an example where an angel is holding a sword over their head, and it's very clear that that sword is supposed to be a flaming sword. So a flaming sword that has the blade waving also. So the whole idea of it being a flammenschwert, a flaming sword blade, does seem to be present at least some of the imagery in the 16th century. So maybe this is trying to intone flaming swords, at least in a European context. However, everyone wants to know, what effect does this have on the performance of it? And we're going to test that today. So I can't do a full review of the sword. It's a very lovely sword made by Lutel. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to handle one of their swords. The fittings are all very nice. It's this nice blackened finish to the hilt. The wood is nicely formed. There's no hot spots or edges on any parts of it. The type of sword design, however, makes it a very stout sword. This is 1.3 kilos, even though it's got a blade of about 60-something centimeters in length. It doesn't have a lot of distal taper on it. We start off at about 4 millimeters here, and it only barely gets to around 2 millimeters down here, which means that the blade has a lot of wobble to it. If I hit it here, there isn't a lot of stability, and so it has a lot of vibrations and oscillations. So I'm going to run it through a lot of tests, and I'm going to put it next to another sword. And I was trying to figure out what sword is going to perform similar to it, and I eventually came up with this. So this is the LK Chen Munich Town Guard side sword, or Town Guard sword. It's a type of side sword. and they both have complex hilts, and even though the Town Guard sword is quite a bit longer, it has the center of percussion in a similar spot to the Katzbalger, and they have very similar weights. They weigh about the same. So I think that this is probably the fairest sword of all the swords I have in my possession to test it against. These are both very sharp, and I have done at least one cutting test with this before filming, just so I know that it does cut. So spoiler alert, you certainly can cut with a blade like this. But we're going to do some other testing. Now, this isn't my sword, so I'm not going to test it against anything like metal. I'm not going to go and try and bind this against another sword, but I'm going to be testing it a little bit more rigorously than I usually do. So you're going to see me wearing at least a few items of protection just to protect myself. I'm not going to expect this sword to break and come back at me, but I don't want any of the things I'm hitting to splinter off and come back at me. So first off, let's do something different. Let's try it against rope, hanging rope. I've gotten a hold of 20 millimeter manila, and one of the things that I've heard this discussed in the design being used for is to improve its ability to cut ropes. Let's give it a try. Now, in reading about Katzbalger, I have generally come down of the opinion that this was a feature seen in European swords as something that was to display the skill of a smith and reflect the status of the owner, the wealth of the owner. Something that was much more form over function. So this, I didn't expect to see much of any difference in the cutting ability or the way that it functions on the sword compared to a single edge blade, other than it being very difficult to sharpen and maintain compared to the other. But let's see how these tests go. Maybe I can be convinced otherwise. Okay, so the first test is going to be against hanging rope. I'm going to try and use the Munich Town Guard sword to give it a chop. I'm going to start with light cuts and then work my way up, and hopefully I'll be able to cut my way all the way through it. Again, this is free hanging rope, which I suspect will be the more difficult target to try and cut. All right, so my first cut went about 50% of the way through. I'll try and cut at a slightly different location and cut a little bit harder. So this is woven of, let's see, it looks like it's a 3-plait braid, and I split 1.5 of the 3-plait. So right about 50% of the way through. Let's see if I hit here. Let's see if I can make it through all in one go. Gonna swing with about 70% force. Not quite. Fortunately, I wound my rope. So my first cut was down here, second cut was up here, and you can see I split 2 of the 3, and the last one was left intact. So we'll try one more time. I'll try and give it full welly, but given how wobbly it is, I probably still won't be able to hit it. Okay. All right, so we'll strike it right about there. There we go. All the way through. Clean. So I had to ramp it up to full power, but I was able to cut the rope clean through with the Munich Town Guard. Let's see how the Katzbalger does. Will these waves make it easier to find purchase? Let's find out. That wasn't fair. That wasn't fair, guys. Let's try that again. Nice and easy strike. I'm doing it right down at the tip. I'm not giving it a lot of strength at all. I hit it and it unfurled because of the strength of it, but I heard something go shooting off. We'd have to go look in the slow-mo, but I don't see any indication of the mark. I'm pretty sure that it did shear all the way through, and it wasn't perfectly clean because I didn't hit with a lot of force, and so it still looped it all the way around one time. I'll do it one more time. Right? Because I'm hitting it very low, so there's almost no mass and almost no tension on it. We'll try it one more time. Oh, so that time I didn't, but it almost cut all the way through. Guys, I'm starting to believe. I'm starting to believe. Huh. Heavy strike. Like there's no even resistance at all. Guys, this blade type against rope, there may be something there. There may be something there. Well, this is probably overkill, but I wanted to test how it would do on a rope under tension. So we'll try with the Munich Town Guard. I'll just try a light cut. I'm going to do it low so that I can conserve my length of rope. Whack. Made it about a third to 50%. To be honest, having the rope under tension didn't dramatically improve the cutting performance of the Munich Town Guard. All right, so here's my first cut. So we're going to aim a little higher. Cuts. Like there's nothing there at all. I way overswung and it wasn't even a powerful strike. Okay, guys, I gotta say, this is making me a believer. I'm curious. Just if I put it under tension, does just the sawing do anything? Sawing does very little. Oh, maybe. Here, let's try. Yeah, you can use it as a makeshift saw if you need to. Can I do the same thing with my Town Guard sword? Because this is very sharp. Nope. Fibrous material, eh? Falling into the notches, eh? This is very interesting. And very quickly, we'll just measure their relative cutting force. If we just take a big swing at my cutting target. So here is the Town Guard sword. All right. Made it about 20 centimeters or so. And the Katzbalger, I actually put it right next to the previous cut, and they are within a centimeter of each other. So as expected, the Town Guard sword is a very good comparator for the Katzbalger as far as raw cutting potential, and they're both about the same weight. This is freestanding cardboard, and I just want to see how it leaves its marks in the cardboard, because testing it on some bottles got some interesting results, and we will do some more bottles here before we're done. So against this freestanding cardboard, and I'll compare it against the single-edged sword as well. So it went in and out. And let's see if we can bring the camera up. So I don't know how easy it is to see, but it has left undulations in the cardboard. I'll try one more with the Katzbalger before we switch to the straight sword for comparison. It hits quite hard. Now, here's an advantage that these type of swords... So imagine for a second that this was not wavy, but just complete with this round spatula tip. It's able to cut convincingly even with the latter portion of the sword. Once I bring the Munich Town Guard sword in, that has a lot of profile taper and it comes to a very acute point. I suspect it's going to have a lot more difficulty doing like I just did right now and cutting with the very tip of the sword through a dense target like this. Let's see what happens. Okay, we'll give the Munich a chance to do its thing. And I suspected the Munich had a significantly more difficult time cutting through because I'm having to cut all the way out here in the foible, whereas it really wants to cut a little bit further on. Now, the Munich's slice was just a straight line, whereas the Katzbalger has these very slight oscillations, so it's giving a bit of a crinkle cut, which is interesting because you'd assume that if it's cutting in this plane that the undulations, which are primarily along the profile, wouldn't make as much of a difference. But there it is hitting at slightly different points on this side, and that's apparently making a difference with how it impacts the target medium. I'll cut one more on the other side. Here we go for the Munich. Once again, the Munich cut straight in, but it suffered the ability to drag the tip out through the target, and it got caught up in the thicker pieces of cardboard that were on the back side. Okay, given its performance on rope, I'm really curious to see about this. I wasn't planning to test it, but this is just a stock of reasonably yellowing bamboo that's about, let's say, 1.5, maybe 2 centimeters in diameter. I'm actually going to start with the Munich Town Guard, and we'll see if maybe a 50% power strike bisects it, and if so, we'll see if maybe I'll reduce the power and then I can switch over to the cats. So let's see. All right, so this is too light even for this sword. Let's see if the Cats does the same thing, or if the Cat struggles. Okay, Cats versus bamboo. That time it got caught. Yeah. In both cases, I think that it actually did less well against cutting of the bamboo than the Munich Town Guard. Now, one of the things that these swords are often discussed in the context of is going up against pikes, whether that's opposing pikes and gaining purchase on them, or actually cutting all the way through them. Matt Easton actually mentioned in Skull's video that when they use trainers in class, the trainer two-handed swords actually are better for opposing pikes, simulated pikes in the bind, which I had never heard of before. So that's something very interesting. This is my pike. It's just a dowel, and it's a little wobbly. And I'm going to first just see what this does in opposition against it, and then we'll take a couple shots at it. I don't expect to cut all the way through it. We do have historical accounts of soldiers running up against spearmen or pikemen and chopping, quote, the heads off of them. The tips of pikes tend to be quite a bit thinner than the end of them. So it's possible, but it's never been discussed in the context of these wavy swords or if there makes a difference. Let's see what happens. So I'm just going to lay the sword against it and push and see what type of resistance I get. Aha! Yep, definitely get a lot of resistance pushing up against the sword. It locks right against the dowel. By comparison, here, if we compare, yeah. This just is sliding and leaving like little narrow gouges. Whereas if I put this up against my pike, I can move my whole pallet. Look at that. Look at the leverage I get here. That was at the very tip, at the very foible of my sword, the weakest part. That makes a huge difference. It basically just bit right into the, in fact, let's see. So even before I swing at it, the side sword, the Munich Town Guard sword, made these tiny little notches, and the two strikes I made, only two push cuts I made with the Katzbalger, already made huge gouges into the pike. Let's take a couple swings at it, see what happens. All right, I'm gonna swing a little bit lower. This is likely to rebound and try and hit me, so I'm going to have one hand out in front of me to prevent my face from getting whacked. Let's see what happens. All right, it just went down, and you can see I took a nice little gouge out of my pike simulant. All right, so we can see where the Town Guard bit into it. What happens if we hit it with the Katzbalger? Uh? Uh? Well, I only brought one pike, so I don't have another one to test it on. But that wasn't even supported well. It was free, you know, I could knock it, I could push it over with my hand. I am flabbergasted. This is apparently making a really big difference in the performance. Let me get one more sword. Okay, here is my Knights Templar arming sword. And this should have more cutting power than the Munich Town Guard sword. So we'll see if this chops differently than the Katzbalger. Whack. And it gave it a mighty gouge right there. You can see it chopped right into the end. And I'm going to hit it with the Katzbalger again. It's so short now, I think it would be very unusual for the sword to break by way of the Katzbalger. But we'll try it again for science. Okay. Katzbalger versus pike, take 2. It didn't break, but the cut has made it significantly further through than the, and this is very interesting, the way that it's cut. So I don't know if you can see it, but the channel that the Balor Arms cut has made is basically a line straight through, which isn't to be unexpected. The channel that the Katzbalger made is variegated, whereas one part is smaller and narrow and thinner, and the other part is wide and almost wedged, kind of like an axe. So it does seem to be having a little bit of an axe-like effect. And I think that that makes sense, because here in the little grooves, you have much less material. You have a longer chance for the bevel to get through. You have a shallower bevel angle, and so this is sharper. Whereas right here on the tip, it's actually quite thick, and so you have a more reinforced point, and so the angle is more like a wedge. Okay, now for something a little different. We're going to test against fabric. This is some old jeans I'm retiring, and it's over a core of just softened cardboard that's been soaked. I don't have tatami, so that'll serve as just something to give it a little bit of resistance. We'll see what the edge can do against that. And again, these are basically paper cutting sharp. Just mushed it, but didn't cut through. I'll hit it a little harder. I'm trying not to knock over my stand. And again, I'm intentionally not trying to blast through the target. I just want to see what the edge does, a flat edge like this does against a target like this. Once again, so no damage at all. Katzbalger's turn. We got it. We got it good. So I'll bring the camera over. And you can see that the little different undulations, instead of hitting it flat, like the flat blade, made a big gouge into it. And that's something to consider, because textiles like this are not always flush against whatever target you're on, but can tremendously impede the cutting performance of even a very, very sharp sword. I'll come at it from the front this time. So we only caused a small wound that time. You can see the line from where I struck, but it did bite. So where on earth does this leave us? I went into this basically thinking that these waves were strictly an aesthetic thing with little to no functional effect on the sword. And admittedly, I was thinking about the sword's performance against flesh and against another sword. Those are two things that I am not going to be able to easily test. I'm not aware of anyone else who's performed these type of tests that we've done here today. So if anyone knows of other testing that's similar to what we've done, please share it with me. This is really fascinating stuff. It's not what I expected to see at all. I really have to reevaluate what I thought these type of swords might be capable of. the ability for it to perform against rope, the ability for it to bind against a round shaft like you might find on a spear or halberd is significantly higher than I would have guessed just from an academic didactic sort of standpoint. This is where the intersection between reading something on the page and what you have experimental archaeology going on. Again, if it were staying with me for longer, I'd put it through much more rigorous paces, but this is a starting place for what we can learn about Katzbalger, or rather Flamberge style swords and what they may have to offer. Very interesting. It's surprising that they didn't catch on more than they did. They certainly were popular for a period of time, and it did coincide with the era of pike and shot. So, very interesting. Hope everyone found that entertaining. Thanks once again for everyone for joining in, and make sure you guys go check out Scalagram and Matt Easton's video on the topic. Till next time, guys. Take care.